Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book, The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel, the nonfiction book by Douglas Brunt. This is a departure from my usual readings on the channel. I've actually been exclusively fiction to this point. And I picked this book up at the bookstore because I had seen in interviews with Douglas Brunt that he did with his wife, who is Megyn Kelly, and I had seen him in other places promoting the book. And I thought, you know what? I haven't read nonfiction in a while. I think I want to give it a shot. So I went to the store and picked out a copy. And as an interesting cover, it's got the ship on here, the Dresden, that he disappeared on. And the book is basically of the premise of what happened. This was such a bizarre case. For those who don't know the story, the short answer is that Rudolf Diesel is a creative inventor, an engineer, who invented the diesel engine, which was revolutionary at the time because it apparently didn't require huge ignition and combustion in a way a typical engine did. It was much smaller. It didn't require as many workers to work on it, and also apparently it was safer and didn't use as much fuel and all this stuff. So there was a lot of greatness behind the diesel engine. And the creator, Rudolf Diesel, when he was about 55 years old in 1913, right before World War I started, he just disappeared. And it was assumed that he had fallen off the ship and died, and that his body was found, and it was assumed to be a suicide. But there were theories that perhaps it was foul play, that there was murder involved, that either someone such as John D. Rockefeller, whose oil empire was threatened by Diesel, or Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was the leader of Germany, that he was feeling threatened by Diesel's connections with Britain at the time. Britain and Germany were about to go to war, and so one of them may have had Rudolf Diesel killed. And so the book is mostly a biography of Diesel, and then it provides a little bit of story, like catching up information about Rockefeller and Kaiser Wilhelm. But again, it's snippets for them. The book is the biography of Rudolf Diesel. And then the last portion of the book, the last about 55 pages, is an analysis of the facts and evidence, and is trying to parse together what happened. And it is very interesting. The book is split into 4 parts. The first part is an introduction, and it tells you the young life of and from being a kid all the way through being a young adult of Rudolf Diesel. It talks about his inventiveness, his curiosity. It also talks about the difficulty of moving around, because his family moves around a lot, from France and England and Germany and all these other places. And they have a rough life when he's younger, and he was born into poverty, and so you're seeing his life unfold compared to that of Rockefeller, who had an interesting life, and also Kaiser Wilhelm, who had an interesting life. That first portion, which is about 100 pages, is great. It is very interesting. It is for me, who likes politics, the politics kept me interesting, as well as just the kind of a pulling yourself up from your bootstraps type thing that happens for Rudolf Diesel. He has some help, but it's a lot of it his own ingenuity. And then you have part 2, which is another 100 pages, and part 3, which is about 70 pages. And these 2 parts talk about the creation of the diesel engine, and then what happens with Rudolf's business afterwards, what happens on the world stage with the production of diesel engines. And this section was, to me, mind-numbingly dull, because it is just the technical, the getting into the weeds of the engineering aspects. If you're someone that loves technical, looking behind the details of something like this, or you love engineering, or you are an engineer, you'll probably enjoy this book, and that middle portion might work for you. But as someone who doesn't give a flip about the details behind the engineering process, I didn't care at all for that part of the story. I wanted to get to the, how did this affect the politics, the geopolitics? How did this affect, the general business? And that's in there, that's sprinkled throughout, but you have to read, 10 pages of the technical stuff to get to maybe a page or two about the actual political stuff. So the middle portion of the book, I just couldn't stand. It was so boring to me. I was this close to giving up on the book. And then you have, and this goes through the history of not just Rudolf Diesel's life, but as the world was approaching World War I in the 19-teens, and you're getting closer and closer to that time, and you're seeing Germany build up their resources and military, and you're seeing England do the same. And I had no idea about the level of involvement that Churchill had pre-World War I even, but he's very involved here. And that part of the story was interesting. But then you get to part 4, which is the last about 55 pages of the book, and that is the disappearance and the examination of the facts and evidence behind his disappearance. That was the absolute best part of the book, by far. The part 4, the mystery was the most engaging that the book got, and I was hooked. And it really was interesting because he not only lays out the evidence, but he tries to say, this is why I think that this is the answer. And if you've ever read C.S. Lewis, he has an argument that he outlines of his Lord Liar Lunatic argument. And Douglas Brunt does something similar here, where he outlines that it could be an accident, that he accidentally fell off the ship. It could be suicide, that he purposefully jumped off the ship, or it could be murder, and he was murdered and thrown off the ship. And he goes through why each reason could have happened, and also goes through the ample evidence of why each one probably didn't happen. And then you have to determine, well, which of the 3 is likely. And he provides his answer for what potentially happened. And I can't believe with a historical book, a nonfiction, that I'm going to say this. I'm not going to spoil the ending, because the ending is brilliant, and the questions it raises and the potential answers it raises are absolutely fascinating. And it rewards you for having read through the book. And I was just blown away, and I had to keep reading at the end. I had to keep reading the end. So the last 55 pages of this book are gold. I think they're fantastic. They're interesting. And the first 100 pages are interesting too. They're not quite as interesting as the ending, but they're interesting. It's just, you have such a long swath, 170 pages. Half the book is just like incredibly boring, and then the other half of it is incredibly interesting, and there's not much in between. I was either all in on the book and I was like hooked, or I was like, I couldn't care less about what's happening right now. And so it's hard to give a recommendation for this book. Particularly, I'll give it if you're an engineer. If you're like a history buff and you love reading nonfiction like this, then this might work for you. But this isn't necessarily the best book for someone who's just mostly a fiction reader. And I've read my fair share of nonfiction in my past, but it's just that, certain parts. I would say that read part 1. And then if you're not feeling parts 2 and 3, skim through them, get to part 4. You won't feel quite as rewarding necessarily because you haven't gotten through all that evidence in parts 2 and 3. But when you get to part 4 and he outlines everything and outlines his answer, I thought part 4 was absolutely genius. So in that aspect, I feel with books, it kind of like with movies, you want to start good and end good, because your starting good is about you sticking with the project, and ending good is how you feel afterwards. And the book ends well, and it ends really well, and I was very happy with how it turned out at the end. So in that sense, I enjoyed it. So I have this just weird conflicting positive and negative review. So it's very, very, very mixed. But I'm going to give it an overall 7 out of 10 because the ending just worked for me so well, and I thought it was so riveting. I think this book could have been reworked, made much less emphasis on the engineering side, more emphasis on the political side, and I think it would have been more interesting. But that being said, I really enjoyed this book. If you've read The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel, let me know in the comments section down below what you think. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.